lose, much to gain, all to lose if we don't ratify the agreement. So then again, it would be again, the ball is in your court, in the executive. It would be good for our country if before the Marrakesh talks in November, we could ratify it. Again, that's 1 month from now. I'm not sure where we at. I understand that there are still 17 agencies that need to give their certificates of concurrence. Again, may I request the Department of Foreign Affairs, even if it is the small Climate Change Commission in charge or the Office of the President, but you have the expertise of diplomacy and you can help with your other cabinet members. I have the list of all those agencies who have not yet given their COCs. I believe it is not because they don't want to. Maybe they just don't know it's on their desks. There's just so much work to be done, and it's a new government. And I've heard it from the lips of the President during the National Security Council meeting after that, when I spoke to him briefly about it. And he said, that was a day that Secretary Kerry was here, and he said, no, I was misquoted, we will ratify it. So thank you for that clarification. So it would just be good if that is ratified again within the year, so we send a good signal to the world during the Marrakesh talks that we are with the world, the EU, India, US, China, small countries, Pacific Islands have ratified it, and we have nothing to lose and all to gain. Again, all the funds that could be availed of by the Philippine government will go to other vulnerable nations if we don't ratify it. That's just my view. Again, I would respect the view of the President and the Executive if your opinion is different from that. Yeah.
Yes, Madam Chair, and I would confirm with you that in our talks that involved the President and Secretary Kerry, and I was there in front when part of the talks, in fact, when we were at the palace discussing, among other things, also this Paris Agreement, that the President indicated, confirming what you just said earlier, his strong support for the Paris Agreement now that he has been notified about the implications insofar as our signing it and nothing to lose on our part because, yeah, and the commitments are conditional. He is now aware of this.
Because we are a non-emitter, we're 0.3.
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that assurance as well. So that's AIIB and the Paris Agreement. Mr. Secretary, could you please brief us on our ASEAN hosting for next year? Are we prepared for it? What kind of activities, programs do we anticipate? What benefits can we see? Could we be briefed on our ASEAN hosting? Because the Office of the President has also requested for a big sum of funds, confidential and intelligence funds, for the ASEAN hosting. So I would like to see our funds for the ASEAN hosting lodged in the DFA and the confidential and intelligence funds requested by the OP for ASEAN.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm asking our ASEC for ASEAN, in fact, to to respond to your question.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Good afternoon, Madam Senator. The President has unveiled during our last summit our theme for the chairmanship of the Philippines, and that's partnering for change, engaging the world. In other words, it's consistent with President Duterte's a thrust of really ensuring that the change that we're looking at will affect the ordinary citizens and not just a few of the society. And engaging the world will mean more inclusiveness, expanding our relations with not just the countries in, our dialogue partners, ma'am, but also the other regional organizations like the Pacific Alliance of 4 countries of Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and Peru, or the Gulf Cooperation Council, or even the Economic Cooperation Organization. For our thematic priorities, Madam Chair, we have identified 6, and it's also consistent with what ASEAN Vision 2025 is looking at, and that's for until year 2025 of a rules-based, people-centered, and people-oriented ASEAN. And by that, we have identified 6 thematic priorities. One is a people-oriented and people-centered ASEAN. Second is peace and stability in the region. Third is maritime security and cooperation. Fourth, an inclusive innovation-led growth. Fifth is ASEAN's resiliency. And sixth, ASEAN as a model of regionalism and a global player. And we have what we call an ASEAN Matters Technical Board meeting, which meets regularly, ma'am. I think now we are on our 4th meeting, and this is the national mechanism by which all our projects, programs, and activities for our chairmanship, which coincides also with the 50th anniversary of ASEAN, are being vetted. So we have established what we call the ASEAN National Organizing Council, ma'am, and the chairperson for this is the executive secretary, and therefore the funding is lodged in the office of the president, because the 3 pillars and the cross-cutting issues. By 3 pillars, I meant the political security pillar that's being shepherded by the Department of Foreign Affairs, the economic community pillar that's being shepherded by the Department of Trade and Industry, and the 3rd pillar, the socio-cultural pillar, that's being shepherded by the Department of Social Welfare and Development. So these to ensure a platform for to simplify all of these budgetary requirements, it's lodged at the office of the president. And the funding for this is actually divided into the different committees. I think we have 7 committees that will be responsible for, it's almost like mirroring the APEC National Organizing Council, ma'am. For the commemorative activities, for the 50th commemorative activities, we are looking at 3 sources of funding. One is the one that's going to be funded at the ASEAN level, at the regional level, ma'am. The other one is that's being funded by, at the national level. So, for example, ma'am, for the regional activities, we have a Humanity Award, a Youth Social Entrepreneurship Award, an ASEAN Biodiversity Heroes, recognizing champions of biodiversity conservation and sustainable management in ASEAN, and a tribute to the ASEAN Founding Fathers. That means yun hong natitira pang next of kin. And of course, that would include the former President Fidel Ramos for the founding fathers of ASEAN. And then at the national level, we will have an ASEAN Street Festival, a commemorative coins and postage stamps event, and a publication of the Philippines of 50 years in ASEAN. Ma'am, these are
That's
just
fine.
a few.
Yes, thank you very much. Are we ready for the hosting? I hope it would be as successful and as flawless, almost flawless as APEC, but I hope not the traffic issue where people were so inconvenienced.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, we're looking at 2 summits, ma'am. One in April and one in November. The venue that we're looking at will not be in Metro Manila. For April, we're looking at Cebu, and for November, ma'am, where we will have the dialogue partners, we're going to hold it in Clark. And all
good.
preparations are so far in place.
I think that's a good decision. Yes, yes. So that we don't receive the same kind of problems and remarks as we did. Yes. Thank you for that. While we're waiting for Senator Drilon, may I ask Secretary Yasay, in the forthcoming trip of the President to China, will the favorable arbitral ruling on the Philippines be used as the peg for the talks of the President with the Chinese head of state? Or will this be set aside for trade or economic talks? Has this been decided on?
I would like to answer that question in full, but because of the sensitivity of what we're doing, I may not be at liberty to divulge this publicly. But suffice it
Certain,
to say,
this has been discussed.
yeah, this has been discussed, yeah. And we are pursuing a diplomatic tact insofar as making sure that certain provisional arrangements will be made even before or during the trip with respect to the dispute in the South China Sea. But the main purpose of this trip is just precisely to strengthen and promote the other aspects of our relationship with China that has been made cold or rendered set aside in the meantime during the previous administration because of the tensions brought about by our filing the case with the arbitral tribunal. We want to pursue and ensure we can continue with vigorous trade relations, investment opportunities, even infrastructure development, cooperation and assistance together with people-to-people contact and cultural exchanges insofar as this trip is concerned. And I like the very whole idea where you mentioned earlier that maybe we can also use this as an occasion to signal and make manifest our ratification of the AIIB agreement in that respect. But the whole idea of this trip in general is to make sure that the environment conducive for a bilateral engagement for the peaceful resolution of our disputes in accordance with the ruling of the arbitral tribunal will be made.
Insofar as we are concerned, are we one in appreciating and recognizing the importance of our victory in the arbitral decision?
Yes,
Yes.
Madam Chair. In fact, this was one of the things that we pushed hard for to be included in the joint communique of ASEAN. And we were successful in doing so, where before this was not achieved. Through the joint communique, we have made sure that ASEAN unanimously agree that the resolution of the dispute must be done in accordance and in respect of international law and the 1982 UNCLOS.
But the ASEAN communique did not refer at all, was silent on the ruling.
It was specifically silent on the ruling because the ruling itself was between China and the Philippines, and we did not want ASEAN to be partial or to be partial about the merits of the case. But insofar as the legal processes and the diplomatic tact that were pursued in accordance with international law and the UNCLOS, this was in fact a tacit recognition of the fact that the arbitral tribunal's ruling must be respected. Yeah.
So even with the absence of the arbitral ruling, the fact that the South China, the West Philippine Sea issue was raised and the importance of resolving it in a peaceful manner was included in the communique, it implicitly means that they're recognizing our claim in that area. And is it also an indication of the recognition of our victory in the Hague ruling?
The recognition of our claim as awarded by the arbitral tribunal is not per se included in the joint communique, but the arbitral tribunal's ruling on the basis of the case that we had filed and was judged upon by the arbitral tribunal or declared in our favor by the arbitral tribunal is the part of the diplomatic processes and the legal processes allowed and sanctioned under international law on the 1982 UNCLOS that was recognized and respected by the ASEAN community. And more importantly, the joint communique also had expressed its concern about the reclamation activities that were undertaken insofar as the South China Sea area of dispute is concerned, which they said should be stopped because it would threaten the peace and security in the area. And that to me is a very, very significant statement that was made by ASEAN because it had a specific reference to the activities being made by China.
Will the issue of the reclamation, military reinforcements in the disputed area, and the killing of biodiversity in the marine protected areas in the West Philippine Sea, will this be brought up in the forthcoming China visit?
This is something that has in fact been brought up in the representations made by our special envoy, former President Fidel V. Ramos. Specifically, it may not be discussed in a manner that we would be coming up with an agreement in this trip, because that is not the objective of this trip. The general objective of this trip is to make sure that it will be part of a confidence-building measure to restore trust and confidence amongst the parties to precisely pave the way for a peaceful resolution of the dispute within the ambit of the arbitral tribunal's decision. Yeah.
For those, for the public and for the Filipino who may not be following foreign policy of our government, the president's visit to China is important. In a way, historic. It's the first visit after the arbitral ruling. This does not mean, however, that we are cutting ties, severing ties with our traditional ally like the United States. Correct. Because some people might misconstrue it to mean that it's either you are my friend and you're now my enemy. You are my friend, now my enemy is my friend. So can you just put on record, Secretary Yasay, that it's not one or the other? That unless I'm mistaken, first, we are not abrogating the Mutual Defense Treaty. Are we, and the implementing mechanism, which is the Visiting Forces Agreement and the EDCA, or are there going to be changes insofar as this treaty and the implementing mechanisms are? And is there a possibility that we would enter into a similar VFA with China?
I would like to make it clear and give the assurance on the basis no less of the pronouncement and declarations of the President articulated during his inaugural address and also in the State of the Nation address, that he respects and will continue to respect our Mutual Defense Treaty, EDCA, Visiting Forces Agreement, and other executive agreements in connection with the MDT very clearly and unequivocally. He also made sure and also gives the assurance that our initiatives towards restoring ties that have with China that have turned cold in the previous administration will be revitalized and be pursued. But this is not to mean that we will be abrogating our alliances with the United States or weakening our friendship with the United States, although there are some people in the media who would try to present it that way. But this is not what the President wants. And I would like to give that assurance as you have asked. The other thing is that when we would like to foster closer relationship with China, we will not certainly engage in any alliance with China from a military viewpoint, because that has never been the intention of the President. In fact, the President, in many occasions, even before the Americans, before our traditional partners, have said categorically that he will only have one military alliance, and our only ally in that respect is the United States. The President had also assured our traditional partners and our allies that insofar as engagements with China is concerned, they will be part of the consultations that will be made. And the fact is that the president had been doing this. We had just met with the Japanese, we have just met with the Australians, we have just met, even I have met with my American counterparts in this respect, where consultations are continuing along this line. Number three, the joint exercises that was mentioned by the president, that might perhaps be the basis upon which this kind of breakaway is being mentioned, is that joint exercises, this is to be distinguished from joint patrols, which is an entirely different matter. The joint exercises that are being regularly conducted is not required under the Mutual Defense Treaty. But these are joint exercises that are decided or recommended upon by the Mutual Defense Board under the Mutual Defense Treaty and the Strategic Engagement Board, where the purpose is that these joint exercises will be precisely to enhance and beef up our self-reliance in addressing, as they may arise, internal and external security threats to the nation. The President's concern about these joint exercises is that they have not met the objectives, as I have just stated. And this is what he is trying to bring across to our American friends. If this objective is not achieved and we continue to be dependent insofar as being able to address our internal and external security needs and concerns, then these joint exercises might not serve the purpose. And consequently, he said if it will continue to be such during his administration, this will not be continued. But it does not mean that because of that, yes, or stop immediately, or in fact will negate or abrogate the agreements and the treaty that we have with the United States. Yeah.
So I thank you for your candor, for elucidating on these messages in media, because clearly these are complicated messages that cannot be understood or communicated in 30-second sound bites or even in 1/4 page stories, because we speak about decades-long relationships or with our neighbors. I appreciate your clarifying these matters. How about the EU? Tomorrow I'm speaking before the EU in a sustainable energy conference, and I know that the EU has also earmarked how much? More than 1 million, 190 million euro. Yeah, 190. That's big. 190 million euro. Okay, that the EU has allocated 190 million euro for energy or electrification. We know that rural electrification is something the country needs very badly, and I would like to know from you, is there any, are there any ruffled feathers between the Philippines and the EU? We are the recipient of much funding for energy, for climate resilience. From 25% of the EU funds comes from Germany. And a German delegation, parliamentary delegation, just met with me today. I assure them of our highest respect and our gratitude for assistance that they've given to our government through GIZ, through many of our programs. So I would like to hear from the DFA, what is our position towards receiving more grants, assistance from the EU, from Germany, from other European nations?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would also like to assure you that I have met with the delegation of parliamentarians also today that you had made reference to, and the results of our meeting had indicated how strong is our relationship with the EU as a regional organization. I've also spoken with the ambassador from Germany in that respect, also this afternoon. I have continually engaged EU representatives, no less than the foreign minister equivalent of EU, Foreign Minister Mogherini, in occasions in the past, in Mongolia, I've also met with some of the representatives even in the ASEAN Ministerial Conference in Laos and also in the United Nations General Assembly. And this relationship continues to be firm and close. Let me just, however, say that our president has been particularly hurt by the action taken by the EU Parliament in making such a critical resolution based on simply media publications that are not verified and unconfirmed, criticizing the war of the president against drugs, illicit drugs, and suggesting that the president is behind the violation of human rights and even allegations of extrajudicial killings, which are completely false. Be that as it may, Madam Chair, as I've said, our relationship with EU as an organization, the Commission itself is very firm and very solid and very strong and very cooperative, and we have the same assurances of the kinds of assistance that we will be receiving from them. More importantly also, the individual members or countries constituting EU, we have separate and distinct strong relationship with them, with Norway, with Sweden, with the other countries. That
Norway is
relationship-
the host of the talks.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
and it is very strong. So the media hype being suggested again by the fact that we are weakening our relationship with this organization is completely false and unfounded.
Also very reassuring. Thank you very much, Secretary, for those. I had to ask this question so that it's in the record of the Senate. Just to be fair to the present dispensation, to the President, to the DFA, and to the present government, barely 3 months in office. So I would also like to ask whether our consulates and our embassies, do our posts have is there an admin order or a department order where all our posts are on the lookout for assistance insofar as energy, renewable energy, climate resilience, and the implementation of environmental laws is concerned? For example, I'm just familiar, let's say, with GIZ of the Germans. They had given a grant of 5 million euro for equipment, I think capital outlay, to the Climate Change Commission. I'm sure that there's much out there in every post. In every post, there must be either a private group even or a funding agency of the government that the Philippine government can avail of to match with the needs of our government departments. While we rely on government resources, the 3.3 trillion in our General Appropriations Act, but it would be helpful if our posts, our ambassadors, our consulates, our technical people would really have an inventory of and a database and really network with all government to government or even private sector networking to utilize it for every aspect of needs of our country. Do we have that kind of attitude? Does it take a department order to inform all posts to be more proactive about this? In short, at any one time, can I ask for all available funds for climate assistance, even technical assistance? Can I ask which post in the world would have information on who can help the NEA for rural electrification? Who can we tap for technical assistance? Who can we tap, let's say, for SPUG areas in remote areas in the country? Who can we tap to assist our micro enterprises? Is that information readily available in a DFA?
May I refer you to our ASEC?
Ambassador Cleofe.
Natividad.
Yeah, thank you very much, Secretary, and good afternoon to you, Madam Senator. As the economic diplomacy pillar of the DFA, it is already very much institutionalized. the mandate for us to seek partners in terms of economic partnership in the field of energy, in the field of good governance, and in all other aspects of cooperation, and
Climate change.
and also in climate change. Madam Senator, I'm glad that you're very familiar with the work that we have done in Germany with the GIZ, tapping all government institutions for possible partnership. And I wish to assure you that this is a mandate that is very much already ingrained in all the posts that we have overseas. It is already part of the economic diplomacy mandate that we have, and every ambassador is actively pursuing it. And all the information that our ambassadors have been undertaking is being reported to the Office of the International Economic Relations. So if you would ask us who are the partners, what could be the projects that we could pursue, and how much would be the grant or the facility that could be tapped, those information would be available at the Office of the Undersecretary for International Relations, which is Undersecretary Tihangu's office. Yeah, yes,
Yes.
Madam, and we
Okay,
have a system of monthly reporting. Yeah.
So please, may I request my good friend, my childhood friend, Undersecretary Dondi, for that information, and kindly give it to us in not geographic region, but in terms of, let's say, renewable energy and climate resilience sectors, in terms of micro enterprises, assistance for indigenous peoples, for rural development, electrification. That would help a lot. Now, is that information given to our government agencies so that they don't just rely on our resources, but actually learn to tap international sources of funding and technical assistance?
Thank you to ASEC Pechi for this and the inquiry. In fact, this is an area for development, and your suggestion of having a very useful central data bank of these types of available multilateral as well as bilateral funding is an ongoing project of our office, UWIR. In fact, with the network of economic officers all over our FSPs, that is the goal, to actually cull together by region necessarily as well as by specific specialty. At present, we are trying to improve the sectoral basis, and I suppose one is energy, one is infrastructure, and of course there is subsectors, tourism and other industrial sectors. Of course, climate change, renewable energy, sustainable energy is an area that requires more focused specialist research, and that is a work in progress. While the FSPs are reporting, we are trying to make a useful data bank of available funding together with NEDA, as well as in partnership with the economic cluster, which is at cabinet level. So I definitely believe this is an excellent idea and necessary for purposes of supplementing the national budget. Secretary Ben Diokno particularly said that the infrastructure program is based on APRO, then based also on lending, as well as based on PPP, and then of course there's the international component of the funding. So PPP will be supplemental to our general appropriation for infrastructure.
Thank you for that answer. I hope that it would not just stay in a database, but also shared with the relevant offices in the executive department so that they could learn to access it. Because when I attend international conferences, talk my friends overseas, those in government, and I see how proactive they are in accessing funds from various countries, especially the small island nations. They're very Maldives, Fiji, even when even during the climate talks in April, during the IRENA committee meeting, the small countries have really accessed Anyway, yeah, the son of this very small island of less than 100,000 people, they've accessed so many funds. Not Maldives. So that's what I want to see, the DFA utilizing its posts for many purposes, but also in culling information and connecting them with our government agencies, whether it's agriculture, education, higher education, DOE, etc., so that we're not just cooped up in this part of the world and always complaining that there's no funds and yes.
With the permission of the Secretary, indeed, it's very, very progressive and forward-looking for you to push the DFA in this regard, because Secretary Yasay, from July 1, has always advised us of the re-emergence of economic diplomacy as an important pillar
Yes.
of the DFA. One important issue that brought the Philippines down 10 points in competitiveness, and this is what you've been saying, is the absorption capacity. There is actually no shortage of money
Exactly.
from the private sector, from
It's
the
the
government.
utilization.
It's the absorption capacity. However, this is where I think the value added, the database cannot merely exist and be transmitted. And that's why our purpose is to really use the expertise of international funding agencies, ADB, AIIB, because there must be value added project study and feasibility studies, because there's no way we can access these funds unless we have the necessary reports and project feasibility studies. So that is where the government can actually help, and so we need to do value-added database availability.
Can you do that?
Yes, we are. That is
You're saying
definitely.
that before your time, this was not being done by the DFA? No?
Well, I'm talking of the funding requirements.
Funding
These are
requirements.
funding requirements for project finance. To access these funds, it's merely aiding the government agencies with the necessary checklists
Yes.
and studies.
And let's not limit it to economic diplomacy, but cultural diplomacy as well. Yes. I'd like to see a more robust cultural diplomacy unit. Because when I spoke, I know that in your NEP, there's hardly any funds for cultural diplomacy. And in the past years, I've always augmented it by putting funds for cultural diplomacy. But paano pag wala na ako dito? I would like to see the DFA on its own put funds in its cultural diplomacy unit, because it is one of the pillars, right? We consider it as one of the pillars. So we would like to see more cultural diplomacy activities between the Philippines and other nations. We have tried within the limits of our resources to put the Philippines back in the art and cultural scene in the world through our participation in the Venice Biennale in 2015 and Architecture Biennale in 2016. But what happens when I'm no longer there? And apart from the Venice Biennale, there are many other things happening, not only in contemporary art, but in everywhere around the world. So we'd like to see more of that, more engagement, so that we are not left out. Well, the country I referred to earlier was regarding being very proactive in accessing foreign funds for their solid waste management and renewable energy is St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It was the son of the president, the prime minister, who was there in the IRENA meeting that I said, oh, there's so, ilan lang ba mga tao yan, 100,000. Ang active nila at lahat na yata ng pondo sa mundo nakakuha nila. Yes. I just want to see that kind of passion, engagement, which I'm sure our DFA, our ambassadors, heads of mission have done. It's just good to reiterate it. Yeah. Yes, Dondi, you're saying something.
Yes, we're pleased to report that last June 2016, we already have a department order reconstituting the Public Information Services Unit into an Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy. So there is now in
Very
process
good.
a one-year program to expand and have a full fully dedicated cultural diplomacy unit.
Before that, there was none? There was already a...
Before, there was a cultural diplomacy unit under the office of UWIR, my office, but now it will have it will have the ability to have its own standalone office of cultural and public diplomacy, which will allow the expansion of and focus on cultural diplomacy separate from economic diplomacy.
Okay, good, good. The questions can go on and on, but we have much work to do. So, okay, UNESCO, you're the head now, OIC, no? Officer in charge.
Ma'am Lila Ramos Shahani, she's the incoming
Oh, Lila, I was just with her last
Secretary
night.
General. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, no wonder she was telling me that she's with the UNESCO Commission. She's the head of the UNESCO National Commission.
Yes, recently
Yes.
appointed, ma'am.
Okay. You have no concerns on your budget, no? No problem?
Wala pa naman po, ma'am.
Okay. And the Commission on Filipino Overseas,
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
good afternoon. Are you also OIC?
Yes, ma'am. No,
It
no
used to be,
appointment yet from
What's her name?
Secretary Imelda Nicolas, Madam Chair.
No appointment yet.
No appointment.
Yes, and you don't have any problem with your budget?
Our single request, Madam Chair, is for the budget for the anti-trafficking campaign. Because recently...
Are you part of the AYACAT?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
that's
We
my
are the
law.
member. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Unfortunately, our request for the budget to fund our 1343 action line for 2017 was not included in the
But
NEP.
why is it under the Commission on Filipino Overseas when the action line and the operations of that would be in the DOJ?
Yes, ma'am. The
That's
IR
probably the reason why they took it out from you.
Yes, ma'am. But the IRR said that the IRR of the law amending the anti-trafficking law says that CFO will also take care of the operation of the action line itself, ma'am, and the advocacy.
There's probably a duplication. I'm the author of both laws, the first one and the amended one. And we'll just make sure that the AYACAT is funded through the DOJ, because the reason perhaps why DBM took out that portion, baka may duplication
Okay.
now with the funding of DOJ.
Noted, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. How about the Technical Cooperation Council? Chair
Yes,
Carino, you used to be with diplomacy, culture.
Yes,
Culture
ma'am.
Diplomacy, di ba,
I used
Ambassador
to be,
Carino? Yes, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
What is a Technical Cooperation Council?
We are the aid agency for helping out the least developed countries. Because we have to allot a certain amount of our budget to share with the world. It cannot be that we just receive.
Palabas.
Yes, ma'am.
I see.
It's a very small budget. It's only
much?
4.3 million.
Okay, never mind. Yes. Yun ang ating pangbigay sa...
But
Ah,
yes, ma'am.
uh-huh.
Soft power diplomacy. And we try to be innovative and creative with such a small amount. Our latest project is gender and LGBT development, and we did it with Thailand. And the participants were from Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar. So we're trying to get the help of other countries for this. And it works well because we share the costs and we use our experts. Thank you, ma'am.
I have so many questions to ask, but never mind. I can ask you anytime. Just... What was it I was... No. I'll just reserve my questions. I can just call Secretary Yasay or any of you anytime. Are there any concerns with your budget apart from what do they cut in DBM? Your capital outlay for your building? Is that what they cut? Yes, Yusek Lingling.
Yes, Madam.
Sir,
I'm sorry.
I thought you were...
We just want to emphasize what I had already stated in the approval of our
To
budget.
restore the capital outlay?
Not to restore, but to give us the flexibility to utilize part of the building fund for our retrofitting purposes that had already been started since 2014. If we will not be allowed this, then we will not be able to continue on with that retrofitting project that we have.
You're asking for the flexibility.
Yes. Yeah, because
was-
because
I
the
don't understand.
DBM had in fact rejected our requests for a fund
For 2017.
for 2017 with respect to the retrofitting,
Meaning the retrofitting ongoing now will have no funds
Yes.
for next year, and
We'll
it's
have no
not
funds
being
for next year
completed.
because it has not been approved by the DBM, and the budget presented only covers the building fund, which is a considerable amount, and we would like to have the flexibility to draw out 1.19 from that, rather 800, no? 900 million from the 1.19 building fund, so that we can use this for,
Ask the LBRMO to check
yeah,
with their admin and
yeah,
finance.
yeah, okay.
Ayos na lang niyo yun
May
sa
I-
admin and
yeah,
finance.
yeah.
Yes. Does Yusek Lingling want to explain it?
Yes, Your Honor. Because the building fund is used primarily for the acquisition of properties abroad and the renovations and furniture, so we have requested, yes, part of it could be used for our retrofitting because it was removed from Tier 2. Yes, we requested an insertion to allow us to, a special provision, yes.
Can you craft it for us? Can your admin and finance and your legal, COA, also talk to the LBRMO and just please craft the special provision you want? So what you're asking for is not an augmentation of your budget, but the flexibility to use that. So, tama yun. Para wag nang dagdag. O basta hindi dagdag hiningi nyo. Sige, basta yung flexibility. Fine. Okay. So, AIIB, Paris Agreement, hopefully everything by the end of the year. And are we able to adjust already the allowances of our personnel and officials abroad? It was already updated because I think 2 years ago that was brought to my attention, and then it was pending then in ES Ochoa's office. I hope that it was already effected. The adjustment of the allowances of officers serving abroad? Has that already been?
Your Honor, no, because it's, well, the review is every 2 years, but we have submitted our proposals to DBM, but we still need an executive order to allow us to increase those allowances.
This was 2 or 3 years ago, and maybe 2 years ago. It was never acted on during the Aquino administration.
The last
It was already
adjustment
adjusted.
in 2014. So the executive order allows us every 2 years review. So we had submitted already.
Okay, I'm referring to the 2014 because it was brought to my attention while I was in London. Si Rico yan eh. Si Rico. Maangal sila nun. Mga 2013 or 14. Then I nagged ES Ochoa, and then it was, so 2014 it was adjusted. Yeah. Okay. And then every 2 years. So hindi pa naman tapos ang 2016, ang review next year, 2017. Okay. So thank you, Secretary. Good luck in your trip to Brunei and in China. Looking forward to good news.
That we would be able to come up with what will be necessary for the AIIB, and hopefully by early next week, we will see how we will be proceeding on obtaining the concurrence with respect to the Paris Agreement.
Just one point before we adjourn. I've received the response of the DFA. I hope it does not happen to anyone entering any country with the visa required. I was set aside and how do you say it? I was prevented from entering the UK because I was informed that my passport was canceled by the DFA. I called our office, I called my staff here. To make a long story short, after being prevented entry for an hour, and I was hungry, I was tired after a long trip, the immigration officer just said, oh, because your Foreign Affairs Department told the Interpol that this passport number has been canceled. I said, why will I ask for cancellation? But finally, they let me in. Apparently, the DFA had given a list of passport numbers to the Interpol of canceled passports, including mine, which was a valid passport but deemed canceled by your DFA. So in short, there was a mistake. So I hope this does not happen to anyone. What if it happens to an OFW? However, I was informed by the immigration officer that you have, where is that document? Whenever I travel, I need the document from the DFA when I enter the US or the UK where I have visas, because it's nakatimbre daw. It's already, my passport has been canceled per DFA in the Philippines. So could you look into this problem? That could be a problem for other Filipinos entering any country with a visa. There was information given by our DFA to the Interpol of canceled passports. Sinong sumagot sa akin sa sulat ko? ASEC Sima Franca. Kayo po ang sumagot sa akin, di ba? Thank you for your answer. Maybe you could enlighten me on this. It was a great inconvenience. I'm glad I was not sent back to the Philippines, but I don't know. That was my last trip. That was in my trip in May or June. In June, I've not left the country since, and I've not gone to the EU or to London or to the US. I don't know. Maybe next time they'll turn me away. I always use my regular passport. I don't like special treatment. I just use my regular passport with a valid visa. ASEC, could you explain? Nagbigay kayo ng impormasyon sa Interpol ng mga canceled passports. Nasama yung pangalan ko.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Yes, first of all, I would like to apologize for the incident.
Ako, nakakatawag ako sa embassy, may staff ako dito. Paano yung iba, mabubulok na lang dun o papabalikin sa kanyang bansa, sa Pilipinas? So,
there was really a mistake on the part of my office. When we agreed, the department agreed to cooperate, through Interpol, the sharing of information on lost and stolen passports. There was a decision made also to include canceled passports. And initially, I agreed to that because it was the understanding that the canceled passports would mean those that are canceled because of court orders, because probably the holder is a fugitive from justice, or probably an escaped, or somebody.
my passport was never lost, stolen,
That's
and
true.
definitely I'm not a fugitive from
Yeah,
justice.
Precisely. That's why when this data was generated, from the system, the data included all passports that were canceled because a replacement passport was applied for. So that's why when, for instance, you had
Passport was never
yeah,
canceled.
that's
It was an expired passport with my UK visa, which was clipped together with my current passport.
Yes.
But I never canceled it. It was an expired passport with a valid visa.
Yes, Your Honor. But in our system, once you apply for a renewal of the passport,
Previous
the
passport is deemed canceled.
Correct. Yeah, that's why. That's what happened.
That means my US visa and all visas are in my old expired passport. I have my new passport, but I have to reapply for all my visas in my new passport? Because you sent my passport number to the Interpol deemed canceled.
Precisely, we did some corrective measures by writing to Interpol through the Philippine Presidential Commission on Transnational Crimes to withdraw the information that we initially sent to Interpol, and then we sent a corrected version of the data. So Interpol has already replied to us that all the old data was already, purged from their system. But nevertheless, we tried also to make sure, for instance, in your case, we already informed the British Embassy here that your passport, the one that was tagged, was never lost or stolen, and that they should inform the authorities, especially the border control authorities.
So we'll see if that works. I just have not traveled since June, since that happened. Let's see if I am barred entry from a country where I have a visa. Okay,
Well,
I'll
I
just
keep
call
my
you.
fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But the same thing with the U.S. Authorities. We also sent a note verbal, to the
Have you
US.
received complaints for
Embassy.
other Filipino nationals?
Yes, in fact, we did.
Kawawa naman.
Yeah.
Anong ginagawa nila?
Congressman Jericho
Also.
Nograles, the wife of Congressman Velarde, I think. Yeah,
Also?
yes. Yeah.
And they were
And-
sent back?
Well, they were not allowed to board their flights to the
Aba,
U.S. Yeah.
It's such an So, wow.
Why, I had to
Buti ako
bear all
pinapasok
this,
ako.
all
I
this,
see.
burden.
Oh, I've not traveled since. So what?
We have corrected it,
So
sir.
it would be
Yeah.
best for me to just have that certification from DFA attached to my passport about that mistake, and it's been corrected.
Yes, Your Honor.
Or before I go to whichever country. No? It would be such an inconvenience.
Madam Chair, yeah, I just would like to give you an updated information coming no less from Commissioner Dulay of the BIR. We will have by tomorrow morning the unqualified concurrence.
Pa kami nag-follow up sa kanila. Bakit sila ganun? Oo.
He had undergone a hip replacement and was incapacitated for 2 months. Yeah, right, yeah.
Unqualified concurrence, then OP can transmit it by Monday. Maganda yun. No? That's, 6, 10. We have 8 days to work on it. Maganda yun, You coordinate closely with the Senate and let us know when it's transmitted here. Sige. Thank you very much, Secretary. We always welcome you to the Senate. I'm just a call or a text away. If there's anything I can do for all of you, they know I'm very accessible to the DFA family. We therefore approve your budget and request you to meet your admin and finance with the LBRMO on the flexibility of the capital outlay, and we will refer your budget to the plenary. Yes, thank you.